Welcome to this short video series which will introduce you to APIs. My name is Valentin and in this video you will learn how to use an API. If you have missed the previous video on what is an API, make sure that you click the notification icon or check the video description. Now let's get started with the tutorial. Without knowing it, you are using APIs most of the time when sending a message on WhatsApp, when asking Alexa a question, or when a software informs you about the latest version that was released and invites you to update. APIs are so widespread and used for various purposes. And exactly that makes it very hard to give like a definition which will tell you what an API is and will give you this aha moment. That's pretty hard. I think the best way to understand APIs is to try an API on your own to get some hands-on experience. And this is exactly what we're going to do now. Open your browser and type in the address jobs.github.com. You will be given this nice interface where you can look for jobs. And these are all jobs that are listed on GitHub Jobs. So you can easily look for something like JavaScript. Let's say in New York. And you will be given a list of job descriptions for different companies that are hiring JavaScript developers. Now, this is the normal website that you interact all the time. But say you want to build your own app or to integrate this data somewhere else. For that, you need to have access to the APIs. Now, some of the websites, some of these providers out there provide an API and give access to anybody to their data, but some don't. So it's not mandatory that every service has an API. But in this case, GitHub Jobs does have an API. So if you scroll to the bottom, you will see here a small link which says API. And this is the GitHub Jobs API. So when you're searching for something, in this case, you're searching for Python jobs in New York, you can open up this link and get a list of Python jobs in New York. But when you're using the API, you can use this address below here that's given as an example. And this will give you Python jobs in New York as well, but in a different format. And this is JSON. Now, in this case, there's really a lot of information here, and the way the browser displays this information is really not so easy to understand. For that reason, we're going to use a better tool in order to interact with APIs, because browsers are made to interact like with normal websites, but we now need a tool to be able to work with JSON most of the time. So I invite you to go to getpostman.com and to download the latest version of the free Postman app to get started. Postman works on Windows, on macOS, and on Linux. Once you open Postman, you'll be invited to create an account. I will highly recommend that you create an account because this ensures that all your data is saved and secure. But if you don't want to create an account right now, just click here at the bottom, skip signing in, and take me straight to the app. This will allow you to use the app and you can create an account later. And when you open Postman, it looks pretty similar to your normal browser that you're using. You can open tabs and you can paste in an address. So the address that I had here from the API, I can simply copy, go back in Postman, paste it, and click enter or this send button. You can already notice that this format that's given here looks a bit different. It's much nicer. And this is because Postman took the response, which normally looks like this is JSON, and tried to make it in a way that it's easier for you to read and understand. You can then see here that you have a list of jobs and each job has some properties, but you can already tell a bit what this data is about. You have like a company and you have like a location and you have like a title and a long description. This is in HTML. And then you scroll and you'll see the second job and the third job and so on. So you can already have a better understanding on what's going on here. Additionally, Postman has taken this address that you've inputted here and noticed that it contains some query parameters. And that makes it easier for you to, on one side, to enable or disable them. But on the other side, you can edit them. So for example, if we're looking for jobs in Los Angeles, you'll notice that the address was updated. And now when we're resubmitting this request, we're getting back a different dataset. So what is Postman actually? Well, Postman is like your browser, but on steroids. It allows you to build really complex requests that you cannot do from your own browser. And Postman is the standard tool that professionals use for API development and testing. What we have used here is actually the request builder. This is a really powerful tool that allows you to edit the different parts of the HTTP request. So for example, here we have query parameters, but additionally you can create headers, you can submit a body with your request, and even more, if you want to go into API testing, you can write your own tests that make sure that the API works as it should work. Now going back to the response that we have retrieved, this is the data that we have from the API. And what Postman allows us to do is to take a look at this API and understand how it's working. And we can play with parameters, and every time we submit this request, we get back some data. So for example, if I just say here something that doesn't exist, like a location that doesn't exist, then I will get an empty data set. The same happens if I write a wrong parameter. So for example, instead of description, I write descriptions, disable the location, and then you will see that the results that I'm getting are no longer with Python. Let's go back to the API documentation and understand what else is possible. And we can see here that the documentation only makes reference to two different addresses. We have already used positions.json, and as you can see, it's here, jobs.github.com/positions.json. And the other one is /positions/id.json. We call these different addresses endpoints because they offer different kind of information. So for example, the first one, positions, would allow us to search for a specific position and will give us a list of results. But the second endpoint gives us a single job posting. So let's see exactly how this should work. I'm gonna copy this and go back to Postman. In Postman, I can open up a new tab. And what you will be able to see here is something a bit unexpected. Now, first of all, we have here a status 404. It says not found. So the resource, the job that we are trying to get, doesn't exist. And there's a very good reason for that. The ID that we have here is no longer valid. So what we need to do is to look into the other endpoint which helps us find which positions are available and to take from there the ID. Now you can see the ID is this property, and this is the value between the double quotes. What I'm going to do is I'm simply going to copy this value, go back to the other request. Instead of this number that was in the original example, I'm going to paste the ID that was given. Now you will see that this now looks differently. The status is 200. This resource, this job exists. And this is the information regarding that job. It's quite typical for APIs to have multiple endpoints which provide a different view on the data. I invite you to continue experimenting with the API, maybe try out some of the parameters available here and see how they work. Normally, this is one side of the story. In case you want to integrate this data on your own application, you will have to make this HTTP request, get this data, and use it to display some information. Now, I wanted to give you a taste of what this feels like when you're writing your own application but all this within Postman. I have created a very small snippet here that shows you how you can use data from an API and display it in a different way. So go ahead and copy this code that you will find in this video description. Go in the Test tab within the request that is fetching jobs and paste it. Now let's hit the Send button again. And this time I'm gonna click here on Visualize. Now what this enables us to do is to write a very simple piece of code and to extract some data from our response. Now the way I have structured this is I simply defined a table and I'm only showing some properties. But you will be able to see that the information that I'm displaying here, this is pretty similar to how this API is consumed by other parties, in the sense that maybe they just want to show the job title and the location and the company that's offering this, but they don't want to show like the entire description. And with the code that I have here, I have defined a table and I have iterated over the response that I have received. And now I have the possibility of selecting only the title, the location and the company and display it in the table. And this is how the table looks like. So the data remains the same. The API is still offering all this data back, but with a bit of code, I can just extract the kind of data that I'm interested in. So this is just a simple sneak peek at what Postman can do. And Postman is very powerful when it comes to building requests and working with a response and making sure that the API works the way we expect it to work. I hope this tutorial gave you a better understanding of how you can use an API. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at the underlying protocol called HTTP that most web APIs use. It's important to understand how HTTP works in order to build requests and to understand what kind of data is being sent. So see you in the next tutorial.